Hey Grd10s, and welcome to your next section of work. So now we are officially finished with the animal tissues. So animal tissues are out of your hair for a little bit of time until such a point when we go back to the digestive system, but that's a little bit later on in the year, so we should be fine. Okay, so plant tissues, I recognize this isn't all of your favorite section. This is one of my absolute favorite sections, so I will try and get you through as painless as possible. It should be quite easy and 100%, so let's try it out. Right, so before we begin, I know that you know what a leaf looks like. I know that you know what a stem and a root look like, but do you know all the other bits and pieces? So I'm not going to go through that whole diagram. Not all of it is important, but I just want to show you a couple of things on there. So first, just so you know, there's you got your roots right at the bottom over there. This particular one is a tap root. You get two different kinds of root structures. You get a tap root, which is a structure that just goes like directly down, like a pen into the ground, and then you have adventitious, which sort of creates this spread of roots all the way across. Then we have the lateral root, which goes sideways. Then going up, we start the shoot system. Okay, so shoots is the entire thing, but it's just where the shoots come from. So the main structure in the center over there, you all know that to be a stem. Hallelujah, thank goodness you know this. Then we've got something called a vegetative shoot. That is when from the base of the roots, a new stem can start growing from the side. You obviously know what a leaf is, but the leaf has a blade, okay? And the leaf blade is the entire structure of the leaf, okay? So the entire piece over there. And then connecting that leaf to the stem is something called a petiole. I like to ask that word. So please go and learn about it. Now, in between where the petiole and the stem is, we can find a bud, okay? An apical bud. So right at the top, you'll find the apical bud. That is the bud that is causing it to grow up. And then we got apical buds on the corner so that it can grow sideways, okay? So we can either grow up or lateral. Then we have an axillary bud, not too phased about that. Then we have a node and an internode. Now a node is every single time a plant grows, it stops at a point and then either produces a new stem to the side or it stops us growing there and then regrows a new section on top. It's sort of just where two petioles are at a point, okay? So every time you see a new petiole come off or a new flower, that is where the node is, and the bits between the nodes are known as the internode. Finally, over there, they've spoken about the reproductive shoot, which is the flower. It's got modified leaves, which are known as petals, and it has stamens and carpels, which are the reproductive organs of the plant. Okay, so roots, stems, leaves, blades, petioles, leaves, apical buds, roots. Alrighty. Now, before we go into the actual tissues of plants as well, I need to fix up some maybe words you don't know, maybe just give you a little bit of background first. So we're first going to look at the word lignan, okay? And there are many different kinds of lignans, but we're just going to call them lignan for grade 10, okay? And even into university, you're just going to call it lignan unless you become a specialist in plants. So lignans are particularly important in the formation of walls, okay, cell walls, especially in wood and bark because they lend rigidity and do not rot easily. So this is a polysaccharide. You need to know that. Lignan is a polysaccharide which is used for the secondary thickening of cell walls. So in that diagram that I've placed in there, well, the 3D representation, you can see it's got a entire stem or branch, whatever that is. Then it goes on to the bark into the cell, and then what the cells with fibers they're made up of. And it's cellulose mixed in between with lignan, and lignan creates that very hard wood, okay? So a leaf wouldn't necessarily have lignan in it, because it needs to be able to bend. There might be a tiny little bit in the center where the vein runs through, but not a lot at all. Next on the list is the anticellular airspaces. They're only really found in higher plants and have interconnected airspaces due to the fact that they undergo respiration, okay? So the intercellular air spaces are pretty much acting exactly like your lungs do, except in plants. So yes, plants have the equivalent of mouths and lungs. I'll teach you the mouth by the end of this episode, this lesson. Aside from its common function, the intercellular airspace serves as a pathway for diffusion of carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. At the bottom over there, you can see that I've put in carbon dioxide in and oxygen and water out. Okay, so that is the intercellular airspace. That is a very large intercellular airspace. If you look at the label for intercellular airspace, and just I apologize for the bad label lines, you'll see that there are gaps between the cells, and those also act as intercellular airspaces. And when we draw the leaf later, I'll point out to you where there are more. Then we have the cuticle itself. No, that's not my fingers. I found that on the internet. But you can go find the cuticle of these yourselves. So a cuticle is, plant cuticle is a waxy, so it's made out of fat, protecting film covering the epidermis of the leaves, young shoots, and other aerial plant organs. So what is the epidermis? Remember we spoke about epithelial tissues, which cover the surface of your skin. Epidermis is the cells that cover the surface of plants, okay? So I've in the top left-hand corner over there, I've showed you what the cuticle looks like, and then what the upper epidermis looks like over there. And we'll go through what the epidermis looks like a little bit later again. But just so that you know for now, that is what the cuticle is. And it's really important that you know that. All right, so these are all the plant tissues that we're going to look at. It looks like a lot, but this is just a way of breaking it down. So if you'd like to draw this and then maybe color code it so that you know what section you're looking at. We're first going to deal with the top left-hand part over there, or known as meristematic tissue. These are cells that are capable of going through cell division, much like your stem cells. So meristematic tissue is the equivalent of stem cells, but in plants. Alrighty. Then from there, once those are differentiated, they will become permanent tissues, and those permanent tissues can be simple or complex, and then eventually we're going to dive into those words. I recommend you try and pronounce those before I get to you, because they got some like funky pronunciations, and I can imagine everyone saying parenchyma when it's actually parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma, xylem, and phloem. Okay. The point of this section of work as well is just to show you how all of these are interlinked and how they make up the different organs of a plant. Okay, so it's much like I was teaching you with the animal tissues, like you know, the osteocytes make bone, the chondrocytes make what do you call those things? Cartilage. These do exactly the same. So a very similar process, just in a different organism. Right, so let's just remind you that meristematic tissue is plants involved in cell division, and then many cells make a tissue, many tissues make an organ, many organs make a system, and many systems make an organism. So cells grow and become structurally different by differentiation. So remember, differentiation is when cells get given a job, and that job is then stuck with them for the rest of their lives, and they will not alter from that unless humans mess around with them, which we do. So we can actually take some of the permanent tissues and turn them back into a meristematic like cell. Right, so let's look at what is meristematic tissue specifically, and this is consisting of actively dividing cells and leads to an increase in length and thickness, so it grows upwards and outwards. Alrighty, and there are three different places where this particular tissue can be found. And also note that even though a plant is 100 years old, it will still have meristematic tissue because it continues growing. Remember the rings of a tree. Each growing year or growing season allows for X amount of meristematic tissue to push out, causing a new ring every single time, and that's how you can tell how old a tree is. Now, where do we find these? There are three different places: apical, lateral, and intercalary. I'm not too phased about intercalary, so don't be too phased about that, but apical and lateral are the most important ones. So where is apical? Occurs at shoots and root tips. So it's to make the plant longer, okay, up and downwise. And it produces primary tissues like root apical meristem and shoot apical meristem. I don't need you to know that. You just need to know apical meristem. Then you have lateral meristem. Occurs in mature regions of shoots and roots called secondary meristems, and that causes the plant to go sideways, okay, or outwards. Intercalary occurs between mature tissues, and this is to regenerate the parts removed by grazing animals in grasses. Okay, so it actually causes, or it can grow like certain parts really quickly, and you can note the difference between the different meristems when something has been damaged and it regrows. So now let's look at epidermal tissue. So now we're moving, this is the first type of permanent tissue. It's not in that list, so it kind of goes under meristematic, but it's more like it's just a non-specific packing tissue, okay? It's there so that the plant has an upper and bottom part, and then it can shove everything between that. So in the diagram on the left-hand side, you can see that there's under the cuticle, the top is the lower epidermis, upper epidermis, and the bottom we have a lower epidermis. So what are the characteristics of this epidermal tissue? They are a single layer of cells, always, closely packed and no intercellular air spaces, so that nothing can get through, because if you had a gaping hole in your skin, you would dry out, and then you could cause, or be room for infection. So they need to be tightly packed, much like squamous epithelium. They are flat cells, they have extremely large vacuoles, so that they can hold the shape of the plant up. They have a very thin layer of cytoplasm because of the large vacuoles. They are completely transparent to allow light through, so that photosynthesis can happen in everything beneath it. And then it may be covered in a waxy cuticle, except for roots. You don't want your roots to be in a waxy cuticle because you want to be able to move water in very quickly. Whereas the waxy cuticle on the leaves actually stop water leaving, okay? But it also is very difficult for a plant to gain water through its leaves, and that's why we need those large intercellular air spaces. So let's now, of those epidermal tissues, there are two specialized epidermal tissues, okay? The first one is known as a guard cell. If you forget what these are, they work like the mouth of the leaf or the plant, okay? They are bean-shaped cells containing chloroplasts. You can see at the bottom right-hand corner over there. I need you to draw the middle diagram, okay? Please draw that. I love asking you to label that. There's lots of little baby structures and stuff in there, which I quite appreciate. They're found in pairs with a pore between them called a stoma, okay? And two guard cells put together with a stoma is known as a stomata, okay? So the whole structure is known as a stomata. So the stomata has a stoma, alrighty. Please also don't get this confused with the stroma, which is found inside of a chloroplast. Okay, so stroma is the cytoplasm of a chloroplast. Stoma is the opening between two guard cells. All right. The two main functions of stomata are to allow for uptake of carbon dioxide and to limit the loss of water due to evaporation. Okay. Now I want you to think about this, and I might put it in a case study for this exam that's coming up in June. Where would you want more of your stomata? Would you want it on top of the leaf, or would you want it underneath? And the reason why I want you to think about this is because there is water that is lost out of the stomata. So now, if you put more of the stomata on top of the leaf and it is open, the plant is going to lose a lot more water. So then you put it underneath, which means that any water that is lost is going to be affected by gravity, pulled down, but eventually creates a very humid environment, which is going to stop the movement of water altogether, okay? And when we do transpiration pull right at the end of the section, I will then explain to you how wind and heat and all those things affect how much water can be lost. But just think of one of the adaptations of leaves is to put your stomata underneath the leaf, okay? Finally, we have the root hair. This thing is only found on roots. So stomata only found on leaves, sometimes on baby stems of like herbs, all right, or very green plants. These are only found inside or on the surface of a root, and that these are specifically to increase the amount of surface area of the root so they can absorb more and more water quicker, so that the plant does not dry out. So the function is absorb water and mineral salts from the surroundings. Okay, you can see that from the diagram over there, you have a small nucleus, then you have an extremely large vacuole. And remember, vacuoles are for holding onto a lot of liquids, which means that it can store a lot of their water, and then it can be transported into the root where it can move up the xylem a little bit later. They are elongated to increase the surface area to volume ratio. If you just answer increase surface area, I'm happy with that. Presence of sap vacuole lowers its water potential, so that water can be absorbed by osmosis. Remember that the water is going to naturally move in if you have a lot of solutes inside of the root hair. So what you want to do is you want to put all of your maybe sugars and stuff that's been transported and created by photosynthesis into the roots. When those substances are there, it's going to force the movement of water inside. Then you shift your glucose towards the center of the root. When that happens, the water will follow. But as you move the water in, there's less fresh water on the surface and more water moves in. So as you shift this glucose, more water gets drawn inwards and inwards and inwards and inwards. And then finally, they have a large vacuole which stores as much water as possible. All right. Sorry, I know this video is a little bit long, but I hope you have a fantastic day, grade 10s, and look after yourself.